Okay, hi, my name is Sabrina Lujan, and I am here for my youth culture analysis to talk about e-bikes and teens. I'm gonna go a little bit of background here. I grew up in the South Bay, which is Torrance, Redondo Beach, Hermosa, that whole area, right? Manhattan Beach. So I've been around e-bikes for most of my life. However, there was a surge in 2020 with new riders, and I would relate that to COVID. Um, E-bikes are motorized bicycles that many children, teens, and adults use to get around town. However, they can reach up to speeds up to 30 miles an hour, and a lot of them are unsupervised, inexperienced riders. Inexperienced kind of looks like people who may lack skills, awareness when riding on a busy street. And as someone who drives around here a lot, I do see a lot of inexperienced riders. And that is not always a good thing. A lot of them don't wear proper gear, or they don't have their helmets clipped on correctly, and they're choosing a great risk, really. Growing up in the South Bay, it was not unheard of to have your social circle revolve around e-bikes. Going to the beach, before we could all drive, we rode e-bikes. Going to school, e-bikes. It was more than just a means of transportation. It was a way for us to meet our friends, get out of the house, and engage with a new community. However, with anything this fast, there are risks that teens and parents need to remember, and how it can affect their development. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss the development, cognitive, and social emotional factors all related to the use of e-bikes. I wanted to start us off with a little bit of a video, kind of like laying the groundwork here.
There's no formal data on the number of deaths across Australia, but in Queensland alone, a staggering 14 people died in e-device accidents last year. Just this month, a 16-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl were killed. Hospitals have seen an explosion in e-bikes and e-scooter injuries, with children accounting for a quarter of all those presenting at emergency departments.
And even in the South Bay, there have been a rise in hospital use of teenagers on e-bike accidents. I see it a lot. I have a lot of family members that work in the hospital, so I hear about it, and it's scary.
The speed at which they're going just doesn't allow them enough time to control themselves, and the natural tendency is to hold on to that handle, and so you end up just falling straight onto your face or head.
The average age of children presenting to hospital.
I would also like to take a note of this is that when teens are riding on e-bikes, like I said earlier, they may not have the proper equipment. And if they do have a helmet on, for the most part, they don't have it clipped in. So when they do hit something or they get into a crash, their helmet is going flying and they're going straight into a head injury. It's really scary, but it does happen.
After an e-device crash is just 10 years old. Doctors say it's reached crisis point.
When you put an electronic or artificial motor onto a device and give it to a child who doesn't have the necessary cognitive skills and ability to manage risk, I think that's a flawed concept.
And that is where I would like to talk about as well, is the use of their risk-taking abilities. They don't have their fully developed cognitive brains yet. So you are giving them a motorcycle, a dirt bike, and without any experience. And so I think that just creates trouble. Next page. Okay, physical development. What is physical development? Can changes in the body physically happen during development? Acne, puberty, that kind of stuff, right? So this point in their life, they are focusing on trying to fit in, making friends, and making sure that those friends stay. E-bike communities can create a tight-knit group of friends, which can help with emotion regulation and hormone regulation. However, it can have the opposite effect. When teens do not have a sufficient way of dealing with their emotions, they may lash out, be violent, or have a harder time dealing with the stress. There have been reports of teens assaulting other teens and adults and creating their own e-bike gangs. This has actually happened in the summer this past year in Hermosa Beach. There were a group of e-bike teens who lit off a firework on the pier. And then they kind of terrorize people, they'll ride around, they don't follow the rules. And so what do we do? Like I said here, adolescents form tight-knit groups of friends which contribute to their hormonal and emotion regulation, right? The strengthening of their synaptic connections can create lasting friendships and a stronger sense of self. This can also have an adverse effect. When these kids are doing those actions, what people are they surrounding themselves with? So it can be hard for adolescents to control their emotions because of the hormonal changes in their brain. However, what happens when they surround themselves with friends that don't uplift them? And so that is my biggest point right there. Our next one is the cognitive development. So the e-bike creates an environment that allows them to show off in front of others. They are more likely to have higher risk-taking behavior. And Sandtrack states it right here, that the presence of peers increased an adolescent's decision to engage in risky driving by 50%, but had no effect on adults. And he is talking about driving a car, but I think that is important to note that I think it can also relate to e-bikes. I think that these teens, even though they are maybe 2 years away from getting their license, they're still engaging in the same risky behavior that someone who has a license is doing. They are still driving a form of transportation without the experience needed. So it makes sense why there's no effect on adults, because their brains have already been developed. So underdeveloped control system teens may underestimate how dangerous something is, making split-second decisions and their lack of safety. I've seen teens take over streets and ride recklessly in large groups. When I've seen teens ride by themselves, they're more likely tame. And I think that's also important to note, that they are more likely to not engage in those behaviors because there's nobody to impress, show off in front of. When teens take risks in front of others, they want to prove something. They want to be taken seriously, and they think that making those decisions will, I guess, allow teens to see them differently. They usually prioritize excitement over safety. Some of them do not even use helmets. Like I said earlier, some of them do not even clip the helmets in. So how, as parents, are we supposed to teach our kids something like this when once they're finally off on the street, they'll just not listen to us? So that is something that I think is important as well. And all the risk factors going in driving on a busy street, even driving down at the beach, there are still people. There's people walking around, there's dogs, there's other bike cyclists, there's strollers. So there's all kinds of things going on that they may not even be paying attention to. All right, and this has actually happened in the South Bay.
Now at 6, e-bikes may be an efficient and also fun way to travel, but they may be creating problems for some people in the South Bay. Gangs of teenagers are using the e-bikes to get around, and neighbors tell us they're being terrorized by those teens.
And tonight, those same neighbors say that they've just had enough. They want the police now to do something about it. Rachel Menitoff is live in Redondo Beach with reaction. Rachel.
Rick Kareen, several South Bay police departments say they are responding to reports of reckless biking and unruly teenagers, and this type of behavior typically increases during the summer months when kids are off of school. We do have some video to show you. It was posted to the Hermosa Beach Police Department social.
And I kind of want to make a note right here that the e-bike that is doing all of this, it looks like a dirt bike. So it looks like it's been modified to kind of resemble a dirt bike, and I don't know if you guys know, but dirt bikes are not street legal, so they shouldn't even be riding that. Anyways.
Media channels. Teens often ride in large groups along the Manhattan Beach, Redondo Beach, and Hermosa Beach strands near the piers. In some cases, passersby say they've been accosted, harassed, or assaulted by kids driving dangerously. Police departments have been impounding electric motorcycles and pocket bikes that are operating illegally. Recently, Hermosa officers have written dozens of citations and impounded a half a dozen of the illegal off-road vehicles. Manhattan Beach PD says it's making arrests and will continue to arrest people who engage in dangerous driving behaviors. It's definitely been a problem in recent weeks, according to longtime residents. Several people say they notice the misuse of the e-bikes all the time. Listen.
But I've seen groups of them kind of messing with people, harassing people, and kind of yelling profanities and even kind of.
So it is difficult for parents to accept this, but as a community, I think that they could come together, or we could come together to create rules for these teenagers. All right. on our next page, we're going to talk about socio-emotional development. So at this point in an adolescent's life, independence is important. The trust between their parents and their children is very, very important. So independence is crucial for the development of a teen. Without being able to have their own decisions, how will they learn and grow? If we were able to slowly give our children more independence, they can prove to us that they are maturing and growing. When we do not give them this opportunity to prove to us, they will never know their full potential. This point in a teen's life is to make mistakes and grow from them. Every time you make a mistake, your brain grows a little bit. After watching those videos of the clips of the teens on the e-bikes, I expect they understand that their actions have consequences. And what I would hope they would understand that. I don't know if they would ever change their behavior unless something else happened. So Sandrock states here that the transition from childhood to adolescence, parents give their sons more independence than their daughters. And while this kind of relates to a sexual thing about, I think that this is important to note that a lot of the time e-bike groups, e-bike gangs, stuff like that are boys. So the women are less, or the girls are less likely to engage in that kind of behavior. And if they do ride the e-bikes, and while I have seen girls riding e-bikes, they are not wreaking havoc, they aren't doing wheelies, they aren't engaging in risky behavior, they are more likely riding just around. It is important to note. And that the influence of an e-bike is more than a means of transportation. It's a way to fit in, and it can even be an identity marker for how teens identify themselves. And that leads us to the developmental theories of Erik Erikson's developmental theories, identity versus identity confusion. Psychosocial moratorium. So this is a time when teens are given the opportunity to explore new roles, behaviors, and identities. And why does that relate to e-bikes? Well, e-bikes give them an outlet to figure out what they like, what they want to be, and how they can express it. E-bikes can create communities for teens like we've seen earlier, and that may be a good thing, or that could be a negative thing. I think that e-bikes can create a good experience, new situations, and make them think and learn and grow. And within those situations where they think, learn, and grow, they can create risks, but it also can create ways for them to not make those risks again after making them. They can create independence, like we said earlier, and autonomy, and teens are testing if they can function without their parents. This is a crucial time in a teen's life to be able to know that they can be independent without their parents. Also here that they can create higher risk takers, speeding, doing tricks, ignoring the laws. And how does that affect them in the future? Will they be adults making that decision? But like we've said earlier with Sandrock's quote about, the presence of peers making risky decisions and had no effect on adults, I think that can relate to that as well. Okay, my overall thoughts. So I think that the use of e-bikes for teens is beneficial. I think that there are risk factors to keep in mind that parents need to understand when they are giving their teens these bikes. I think that when we pigeonhole this into being only a negative issue, we ignore all the good aspects of teens going out and riding their bikes with their friends, creating these communities, creating these environments. But if we say it's only positive, we ignore all the bad things that can happen. As someone who has a little brother who rides e-bikes, I can say that when he rides his bike, he is happier, more engaged when he's at home, and has become more trustworthy. While I cannot lie that there are teens out there who want to wreak havoc on communities, I think it is unfair to say that all are like this, and that put them in one stereotype is not okay. I would rather have teens outside than being on a screen. We live in a world where people are iPad kids, where kids are iPad kids. They rely on their screens. And when we have them go outside and ride a bike, and while it might not be a regular bike, a non-motorized bike, they are still outside, getting fresh air, riding around, being with their friends. But the risks that they take will affect them. We have to mitigate those risks. We have to talk to them about this. So overall, I think that e-bikes can be beneficial for students. I think outright banning them is not okay. I think that by banning it all outright, the kids that use it properly, it's unfair for them. I don't think banning it completely will have any benefit whatsoever. I think creating more rules and more regulations for teens would help them overall. And then I want to finish off with a quick YouTube video for teenagers.
No more e-bikes on campus. After a long debate tonight, the Newport Mesa School Board voting in favor of a ban, a first in fact in Orange County. The new policy will ban e-bikes on elementary and middle school campuses in the Newport Mesa Unified School District starting next school year. Certain e-bikes will be allowed for high school students, but they will have to have a sticker to park on campus. And
I want to make that note that she says for high school students, when a lot of high school students already have their license. So it doesn't necessarily affect them. It's mostly the middle school students.
Complete a required safety course. Not everyone at tonight's meeting supports this ban.
I think it is unfair because some parents might not be able to get their kids to school without them.
I ride safely. I follow all traffic laws. I don't wheelie, ride, show off, or ride recklessly in any way. Despite this, the proposal tonight will punish people like me who are just trying to get to school.
Now, the city of Newport Beach has beefed up its policing of e-bike riders and recently updated regulations to address reckless behavior.
And I think that is important. I think beefing up regulations and rules for teens to follow is what we need to do instead of outright banning them. Like that kid said, it affects him being able to go to school. And I wouldn't want that for my child. All right, thank you so much for your attention for this. I really actually appreciated doing this because it opened my eyes to all kinds of different things that I didn't even think about. Thank you so much.